So let's talk about the top three reasons why you actually need to use your social security number, the nine-digit number, the revocable trust, your straw man that was given to you at birth. This, there's many aspects of this contract that are clearly disadvantageous and are put you into the position of a slave in terms of this country and the public jurisdiction under the thumb of the government. And part of what I talk about on this channel is the idea of this distinction between public and private and how to use a private trust to sidestep and step around gracefully those public areas that compromise you. However, there are certain areas where being public in that sense, it actually helps you. And so using your social security number and your straw man is actually essential to live a productive and a fruitful life. And so these three ways, I use them in my life, and I want to demonstrate that, through examples. So the first one that's might seem fairly obvious to you is identification. So being able to have ID, first of all, like, get a passport, to get a driver's license, you need certain documentation from the government, from the state, primarily your social security number, in order to get those documents and to get all those public facing identification forms that allow you to operate smoothly and efficiently in the world. In theory, is it possible to, raise a child off grid where they just never get any number and they live in the woods, like that TV show Hannah, where she's like an assassin and like lives in the Russian woods and whatever? Yeah, it's theoretically possible. But do you want that as a life for your child? And, yeah, is that just something that is necessary? And the answer is no, it's not. God wants our lives to be easier and to give us tools to do that. And the trust, operating in a private manner in certain ways is a part of that equation. But in a certain part of the equation, you need that public facing ID to just get around smoothly in life and also to even get accounts for the trust. Because different institutions for KYC purposes know your customer. They're going to ask for ID and they're going to want to know who you are, and they're going to want to identify you not just from your identification, but also from your social security number. They're going to want multiple forms of ID. And that's actually for your benefit, because that means, in terms of preventing fraud and preventing potential attackers from getting into your accounts, you want that because you want to be able to show them, hey, this is me. I can show my ID. I can have multiple forms of ID that I could show. And that's proof at all times that protects the boundaries of your trust in case of some, outside scenario where you get attacked, and you want the right protections in place. So showing ID in that sense is not a bad thing. And even getting that ID in the first place, it's essential to have and use our social security number, our trust given to us at birth, in order to do that. So that's really the first obvious key that is just massively helps us get around life. Now, the second thing that may be a little less obvious is using credit publicly. So if you already have good credit in your person, if you have another type of entity, an LLC or something that has a good credit and a good track record, credit is a shell game. And so especially credit that's not tied to your person, this is credit that you can rack up credit and then just not pay it back. And you could even do that in your person. You just have really bad credit. So you don't necessarily want that. But credit is this game where it can dramatically help cash flow in a business, where you can just put stuff on a credit line. And then if your business really does make money, then you look at every month or whatever your period is, and then you say, oh, okay, look, I made X amount of money from different clients. And then you go pay off your credit lines, and then you rinse, repeat, and you can get points. And there's various different nuanced strategies that you could look into. But using credit definitely helps manage cash flow. And so many business owners already do that. And if you decide to use a private trust, you can continue to do that and expand that by creating new credit profiles for your trust, but also continuing to use your own old ones, because those are liabilities. Anytime you move money on and off a credit line, that's never a taxable event. Why? Because it's not your money. It's money that was created by an institution, which they borrowed from the government, which printed it out of thin air. That was, essentially created by the devil. So because that's not your money, that's why moving it around and making transactions on those credit lines, it doesn't create taxable events for you, so it doesn't compromise your person. Therefore, if you have good credit in your person, feel free to maximize it. I use cards in my person and I pay them off every month. And I know many business owners that do things in a similar way. And I also, I'm building trust credit, and I have a credit card in my trust, and so that's something that's also available for many people as well in order to continue to expand their credit presence even outside of their public statutory credit. They can get private credit too, in the sense that their trust that's private holds the credit. So the final main thing that I've seen many, many trustees use that really moves the bottom line in terms of ease of use is holding public licenses. Because public licenses, because you're facing with a public entity being the state, that's a statutory relationship where they just have certain rules, and oftentimes those licenses can only be held in certain public statutory entities, so LLCs, or ideally your person. And so using your person, which was given to you at birth, using that to hold different types of trade licenses, like if you're a plumber or, some type of contractor that's licensed, or if you're in financial services and have a license or real estate, whatever it may be, you can hold that license in your person. You don't need to use unnecessary other public statutory entities, but then all your economic activity will then be shifted into your trust. And that's why we have our trust match our name. Typically, that's always our first trust, so that contractors, independent contractors, and people who are tradespeople, they can use their name trust independently, and they can still have like sort of a public facing, persona that the government sees. Oh, that's a publicly licensed tradesman. Okay, great. But on the private side, that's where all their economic activity ends up taking place. And so they're not creating any taxable events using that type of strategy. And I don't know literally hundreds of people that do that across a wide variety of business verticals. So ultimately, doing that, that's also something that requires your person to be able to do, right? So these three ways are ways that I use myself. I have credit in my name. I obviously use ID to even get that credit, and then to do a lot of other things that make my life easy. I have a passport. I've traveled to many different countries. So again, I've needed my name to do that. And then, you know, I also have had different licenses. Like I particularly had an insurance license in many different states around the country. And I was advising a large, financial wealth planning office on multiple different angles. And so I worked with other people who were also licensed in a lot of other things. And holding it in my name was something that was still possible when I was still doing that. And I also used the trust to conduct all the activity. So all the 1099s I just put on my trust, but I held the license in my name. So this is possible in many other fields as well, and I've seen it. I see it happening on a daily basis. So if you want to learn more about the ins and outs and how to move through this and where is it good to be public and where is it good to be private, the community is where we talk about all that. And there's plenty of proof, plenty of examples from hundreds of other trustees in there. So you can check out the link that I'm going to drop below and hopefully join us. And these are some of the tactics that make your life easier. It's not all about just being a complete, like, hermit. You want to actually interact with the world in ways that make sense, but you want to do it privately when it makes sense and publicly when it makes sense. So I look forward to seeing many of you in the community. And for the rest of you, good luck out there.